Hey guys, it's Nanny Like a Boss, or Rachel if you prefer. I wanted to talk a little bit today about an issue that has become more common in the nanny industry. People have started to bring light to this issue in the nanny community, and being more open and honest about it, and that is chronic illnesses. Today, I wanted to spend some time sharing about my story with having a chronic illness. It's hard because it's not necessarily something that I want to bring attention to. You know, the last thing I want to do is go into a family's home and say, hey, by the way, I have this, and as long as you can deal with that, then we're good. I don't like to put, you know, I don't like to put that out there. Unfortunately, it is something that I have to do. So, we're going to talk today a little bit about chronic illnesses in the nanny industry and how to work with that and how to be confident in yourself, even though you know that you have some disabilities or something that might present challenges. So, today I want to share my story about the chronic illness that I have, and I have epilepsy. I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 5 years old. My parents said that, or at least my mother said, that it presented itself with like tremors. So, you know, if you think of somebody with Parkinson's, so it would present, and this is just me mimicking, it would present itself with tremors and different parts of the body. So my arms, my legs at different times and different times of the day or at night, at random basically, and also blank staring into space, which if you're a 4-year-old you don't often do that because you're always on the go. So that was a little unusual for my parents, but they didn't think a whole lot about it. You know, this was the early 80s, free range children, you know, you let your kids go outside and play. One of the scary things for my parents, especially my mother, she's the one that talks mostly about this with me, is that they would often find me, you know, after playing for a little while outside, you know, go outside, get some fresh air, she'd call us back into the house, me and my brothers, and oftentimes she couldn't find me. And this was very worrisome for her, of course. But usually what happened was I would fall asleep somewhere. Now, it's not that uncommon for kids to fall asleep every once in a while if they're overly tired in a random spot. I've had kids fall asleep underneath table chairs. I've had them fall asleep in a corner. But my mom would find me asleep in very random, maybe scary places. One of them was the chicken coop. We lived in a house that was on a farm. We rented it. It was a farmhouse. And the people who owned the land in the house, they rented it to us. It was good. It was out in the country. We lived on a dirt road. But anyway, we got all the perks of being able to play on the farm. So one time my parents found me in the chicken coop. We had baby chicks, and they found me asleep. Another time, they found me in the barn on a pile of hay. And then the most scary one for my mother, and she always brings this up, is when I fell asleep, or I'll just say that she found me, because I don't really know that I actually fell asleep. I might have actually had a seizure. But anyway, she found me, and she was looking for me 2 houses down from the place where we lived, on the neighbor's porch, fast asleep. So that was a bit alarming for my parents, obviously. So putting 2 and 2 together, my mom's thinking, yeah, something's not right with my child. So she took me in. She talked to the doctor. The doctor scheduled an EEG right away, which is something that doctors use to schedule brain waves, or not schedule, but to track brain waves and see what's going on. So they put leads, wires all over your head, stick glue in your hair. You have all these lead wires that are attached to a monitor, and it's kind of like a lie detector where they have this little needle that it prints off everything, measuring your brain waves. And it will show if there's activity, abnormal activity, or if it's just regular. And sure enough, came back with crazy up and down abnormalities. So my doctor took a look at that, and he said, yes, she has generalized epilepsy. Now, back in the 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of research on epilepsy. You know, it was kind of lumped into one big old group, at least from what I understand. And so, if you had seizures, you had epilepsy. That was pretty much it. So, generalized epilepsy. They put me on medication right away. I was on Depakote, the worst medication you can ever possibly go on. Please don't go on that if you have depression or any other issues that they want to give that to you for. It's horrible. It is horrible. It will ruin you. It ruined my thyroid. It ruined my hormones. It did a whole lot of horrible stuff to me. So, side effects. Please don't go on that drug. Anyway, I digress. So they put me on that. I was on that for years and years. I didn't have a lot of drop seizures or grand mal seizures. Maybe once or twice a year, if that. It wasn't very frequent. Most of them were just these tremors, and I would have them all day long. My mom said I would have hundreds and hundreds of seizures a day, to where I couldn't function. And this was with medication. So as I got older, it got worse, and it progressively got worse, especially when I was in puberty. Your hormones are going nuts, and then you've got this medication that you're taking, your brain's trying to track, and it's having a really hard time. So that presented a nightmare in and of itself, and I apologized to my parents because I was a horrible teenager. Just because I was so moody all the time, and grumpy and depressed and mournful, and yeah, I apologize to them. I think the hardest thing about having epilepsy, especially in that time, was knowing that I didn't have any independence, and knowing that I wasn't going to have any independence. As I went to the doctor over the years, and you do your yearly checkup as you do with your neurologist or your general physician. Every single time I went, they would say, oh, you're young, you'll grow out of it. You know, every single time, verbatim, you're young, you'll grow out of it. People usually do grow out of seizures. You know, 16, people are getting their driver's licenses, they're able to go on dates, they're able to do social activities. I wasn't able to do any of those things because I couldn't drive, because I didn't have friends that wanted to take me, because they were afraid that I would have an episode. So my mother was my caregiver. I mean, she took me everywhere. She was my biggest champion. And she had her hands full. I mean, she really did. So, you know, she was a blessing in my life. That's what I can say about that. But as people, you know, my friends got older, people started doing stuff, and I was feeling more and more isolated into my bubble because things weren't going great. You know, it was okay. I was plodding through. Around the age of 18, I started babysitting and doing that was one of my first official nanny jobs. I should say unofficially because it wasn't on the books. And I didn't know a lot about nannying and what was classified as that, but I worked as a nanny for 3 years for this family that had 3 little girls. I worked Monday through Wednesday, and it was so much fun. I loved it because I felt like I was able to get out of the house. I was able to have fun with the kids. I love kids. My mom loves kids. You know, parents would bring their kids to my mom all the time to babysit because she was so good with them. She had a loving heart. She was very squishy, just like me, and kids just loved her. She was a very animated person. And so through her and the kids that used to come over that she used to watch, I naturally kind of fell into that progression of taking care of children. And so that kind of started my love of early childhood education. And I did a lot of babysitting, not a lot at night, but I did some during the day. And we had a family that would bring over their children. It was a foster family. They would have foster kids in and out of their home. And when they were busy or had to go somewhere, they dropped the babies off to our house. And some of these babies were drug addicted. They had different kinds of issues. And we just learned to cope. And those were some great years when I was able to learn how to deal with children with those kind of issues. So that was helpful. And that's when I was living at home that we did that. But as I was 18, everybody was moving on, doing their own thing. You know, I was still kind of stuck. So I was doing that nanny job, and it was fun. It was good. I enjoyed it. But then after that ended, I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I ended up working for a factory company, and I had a friend who was able to bring me to and from work. At this point, my seizures were relatively, they were okay. I won't say they were controlled because they weren't controlled, but they were okay. And actually, I had taken myself off my epilepsy medication because it wasn't helping and it wasn't doing anything. My parents didn't have insurance, so we're paying $500 a month, $700 a month. Honestly, I really don't even know because they paid for it. And we were a very low income family. So I don't know how they were able to pay for it, but I do know that epilepsy medications are extremely expensive and they're getting higher and higher every year. So my parents were taking care of that. I was living with my parents. Couldn't drive. You know, I was stuck. My mom, if my friend couldn't take me to work, my mom would take me to and from to work. She would take me to and from choir practice. She would take me to and from friends' houses. I mean, it was a constant. She would take me to and from college, and that was over an hour away. She would drive me anywhere that I needed. And she never really complained about it, which I always find to be completely amazing. But anyway, seizures and seizures and seizures. You know, I had grand mal seizures in church. Those are the kinds of seizures where you could call them drop seizures, where you just fall and you just start convulsing. Those are the famous grand mal seizures. I've had 2 of them in church now. And one time when I had one in church, the lady next to me, she thought I was full of the Holy Spirit. I was falling down with the vapors. I had the Holy Spirit. So anyway, a little bit ignorant, but I think it's kind of funny. So there have been different experiences like that. And, you know, when you're younger, and even when you're in your teens, people look at you differently. And they're like, that's really embarrassing. I don't want to be her friend. How embarrassing is that? So there's a lot of that. A lot of shame involved when you have a chronic illness. But as I got older and I became more confident in myself, little by little by little, I decided that I wasn't going to let this hold me back because I was so tired of being sad. I was so tired of being depressed that I wanted to get out. I wanted to live life. I wanted to be free. So I did what I could. I did the best that I could. And eventually we found a new neurologist that was much better, much, much better than the previous one that we had. He was much more educated. He seemed to care more. And he actually diagnosed me with the type of seizures I have. If you remember, in the beginning, I told you that I was diagnosed with generalized epilepsy. That's a whole umbrella of seizures, saying, that every single seizure comes under that. He diagnosed me with juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. And so these shaking things that I had were myoclonic seizures. And just like if you're like staring off into space and you're trying to think of something and you can't think of what it is, you're having a memory lapse. That's kind of what it feels like. Only your body is doing it and your brain is like somewhere else and your body is shaking, and it's very strange. For me, if I continued to have myoclonic seizures over and over and over again, they would come in waves and they would get worse and worse and worse and worse until poof, I would have a grand mal seizure or a drop seizure. So he put me on some medication that did help. It was starting to improve, and by that point I had been on Depakote for almost 15 years, and I ballooned. I absolutely ballooned, because one thing Depakote will make you do is gain weight, and I still have not recovered from those repercussions. That's just one of the side effects that it has, and I'm trying to get back on track with not going into that process of feeling like I have to eat all the time, because that's how the drug makes you feel. So it's been a long, hard challenge with that, trying to reset my body. But he finally put me on some medications that actually helped, and they were expensive. I mean, we're talking $1,000 a month for medication. My whole paycheck at that point was going towards medication. It was ridiculous. And at that point, I didn't have insurance. The next year, I did sign up for insurance, and it did cover some of it, but I still had to pay like $300 out of pocket. And at that time, I was working at a daycare center. And so I wasn't making a lot of money. If you know anything about daycare centers, early childhood developmental centers, you make minimum wage. Doesn't matter how long you've been there, you don't make a lot of money. So, I was kind of stuck. So I did what I could, and that was insurance that my company offered. It wasn't the best, but it was okay. It got me through. But it was still a struggle. And then I found an epileptologist. I had a grand mal seizure. This was one of my church seizures that I had, out of the blue. My seizures were doing okay. I was feeling pretty good. Wasn't great, but was feeling okay. Had a seizure out of the blue. Grand mal seizure, and my mom said, "That's it. We're taking you somewhere else. This is ridiculous." And I told her, I said, "I want to go to an epileptologist." I had done some research, and I didn't even know those existed, 10 years ago. But I found one. He was a great one, and he said, "You know what? Let's take you in. Let's get you and put you in an epilepsy monitoring unit. That's where they take you in, and you're admitted into the hospital, into, I don't know if they call it the neurology ward or what it is. But anyway, you have your own room, and again, they do an EEG. However, this time it is a 5-day EEG. And so they stick electrodes all on your head. And one of the things with EEGs is they try and trigger a seizure, because if they can catch a seizure on your EEG, then they're able to tell where it's coming from in the brain, and they can better diagnose, and they can better figure out how to treat the kind of seizures that you have. So I have juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. I'm going into the EMU, going into the hospital. They stick those leads all over my head, and I am stuck in bed. can't really get up for anything, and I have to take my little pole with me that has, my head is attached to everything. Oftentimes, this is a little known fact that people, if you've talked to anybody with epilepsy, they will probably tell you this, that you could have 100 seizures a day, but you go in and you have an EEG, it'll show nothing. Unless you have major activity, like unless your brain is doing some major funky stuff, it's not going to show up. So oftentimes epileptics go in and they do EEGs, nothing shows up. And it's very frustrating because the doctors can't do anything about it, the patients can't do anything about it. But I know my triggers, and one of my triggers is caffeine. So I told my then boyfriend, now husband, I said, go buy me a pack of Coke. And I had not had Coca-Cola in probably at least 5 or 6 years because it was a trigger. Stimulants. Can't have stimulants. It just makes my brain go crazy. So I told him, I said, buy me some Coke. And I started chugging that stuff from the time I got in there. And also with the EEGs, they do flashing lights. They taper off your medication doses. They deprive you of sleep. All of this is to try and catch a seizure. Try to activate your brain to catch a seizure. Because what you don't want to happen is to go in, spend all this money, and not have anything, have inconclusive results. So I was able to go in, and sure enough, third day I had a seizure, so hard that I dislocated my shoulder. So that was fun. But I was so happy because at this point my insurance had covered the whole thing because I had already met my out-of-pocket expense because my medications were so high. So that was nice. It was all completely covered. I didn't have to worry about that, and that was a blessing. Anyway, so I continued to work in childcare in the daycare centers, but after I had my EMU, my doctor said, okay, we're putting a plan together for you. And he gave me a couple different meds. He continued to increase the dosage until we found the right combination. And after that, I'd say about a year after that, I became seizure free. And to the point where I can drive now. And so I've been able to drive. I've been able to drive for a while now. That was, it was like 15 years ago that happened. So I've been able to drive for a while now. The problem is that my medications are so high still, even with insurance, and I have good insurance, but the deductible is super, super high. The premiums are really high, and it's hard to afford medications. Some of these drugs are not covered by insurance. Thankfully, I'm on one of the insurance plans that it's like one of the only ones that covers the medications that I'm taking. Even with that, my co-pays are $100 a month for each prescription. And so altogether with my insurance, my prescription co-pays, with my saving, because I have to save for my deductible for the following year, and that deductible is $3,500. And to some people that might not seem like a lot, but when you have a nanny wage, it is a lot. And I make $16 an hour, so not super high, not super low. I'm kind of in the middle. It's not really enough to live on right now with the cost of my medication and all of that in my insurance. So I pay about $750 every month that goes towards my health care, my meds, my insurance, my deductible, everything that I have to pay for every single month. to make sure that I'm okay, that I'm safe, that I'm alive. Because if I don't take these medications, it's possible I could die. And yes, you can die from epilepsy. It's called SUDEP, SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. This is where you can have a seizure and suffocate, or just have a seizure and drop. It might be too much for your body to handle. So it can happen. I need these prescriptions to live. I live in a rural area right now, a place that we can actually afford because of my low income, and my husband's as well. We make decent money, but because of these health issues, it's really hard to afford the things that we need. Right now, I'm in need of a car because my car was hit by a deer, or a deer ran into my car. There was a whole herd of them. We have fields on either side of our house. So all the way down, we live on a country road, not a dirt road, but a country road. And there's fields on either side of the house. Those deer like to go back in there. They hang out by the tree line back at the end of the field. And sometimes they just keep running. This was a herd of deer. It wasn't just one. It was like, I would call it a stampede, but it was not quite that. I would say it was at least 6 or 7 deer. So it was pretty hard to just not get them. And it was at night, so that was hard too. So boom. And my car is old. Like, I have a 2003 Toyota Avalon. It's got 260,000 miles on it. It's a great little car, but it's starting to fall apart. And so my husband and I are trying to afford a car. But right now, with the way the economy is, and housing prices, used car prices are going up because they're not making those microchips right now. And it's almost impossible to find anything. So my car still runs, but it's falling apart piece by piece. And it's just a really big struggle every single day. I really need to either find a second job, which is pretty much impossible to do right now at this point because I work so many hours. And I have worked, most of my life I've worked 2 jobs. Since I've been able to drive, I've worked 2 jobs. But it's just frustrating. And when you're in the industry, you have to go in and you have to tell parents, hey, by the way, I'm an awesome nanny. I would be great for your kids, but I have epilepsy. So parents don't always take that really well. Fortunately, the parents that I've had have taken it in stride, and they're like, okay, we love you. We think you're great. Thank you for telling us. And, we will keep an eye on everything. I tell them nothing's going to happen. More than likely, nothing ever will. But I need to disclose this to you. If you have a chronic illness that is something like epilepsy, or if you have low blood sugar, or if you have diabetes, something that you could pass out on, or something that could just make your job unbearable to do for that split second, you do need to tell your bosses. I had read something on a Reddit thread a couple years ago, and it was about this mom who was talking about her nanny. She came in one day and her nanny was having a grand mal seizure on the floor while the kids were running around. And she said, I don't know what to do. I didn't know she had epilepsy. What do I do now? And it was more, it's hard to get the tone from what somebody's writing, but I'm thinking it sounded like she might want to sue her. And that is a real thing when you work in the industry, is if you don't disclose information, you can have repercussions come back on you. Now, some people say, oh, the Disabilities Act, you don't have to disclose anything. That's true, and you can choose not to, but then you're running the risk of ruining your reputation if something happens. Putting the kids in danger, that kind of thing. So I am very safe because I know that my seizures are controlled and I know that things are well, and I don't drive with my children, which makes it not super fun, but parents understand that and they're fine with that. And things just, things are okay. God has provided. Eventually, I would like to continue working as a nanny, but I want to keep raising my rates. The more experience I get, and I've been a nanny for almost 8 years now. So the more experience I get, the higher I can raise my rate. But having a disability, parents have to take that into consideration. So if you do, my advice would be to just disclose that information to the family that you're working for. That's all I can say, is that, we need to be honest in this industry. We want to have a great reputation as nannies, and you should want to have a stellar reputation as a nanny, even more if you have a chronic illness. I love my kids, I love my babies, and I wouldn't give anything for that time with them. And yes, sometimes I do have parents say, I had one parent say at one point, and I don't even know what brought this up because I don't even think we were talking about epilepsy, but she goes, how would you feel if your nanny had epilepsy? And I was, what? And I didn't really know how to answer that question. I don't even know what I said because this was quite a few years ago. I'm sure I said something nonchalant, off the cuff, and just kind of breezy, something, that wasn't going to draw attention to anything. But in my mind, I'm thinking, you hired me, honey. You knew what you were getting into. So I try to not talk to parents very much about it. I let them know that I have it. If I have an issue, I will let them know. But other than that, I try not to talk about it. I try not to bring it up because I don't want them to think about that the whole time. I put it in my contract, just so you know. Sign here, if you want me to be a part of your family and helping your kids learn and grow. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. I hope that your medications that you take for your chronic illnesses are not as expensive as mine. I make $32,000 a year gross, and again, $750 every month is taken out for health. So it's not super fun. And I love my job. I'm not going to change my job. I'm not going to change my career. But sometimes you just need help. So I'm there for you, sister. I'm there for you, mister, if you are a manny. Let's just be honest. Let's be open and honest, and let's be courageous and strong and confident in who we are as a nanny, who we are in our profession, and know that this is not going to stop us. It's just one extra hurdle that we have to jump over. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you again soon.